What the hell is a TCK?
Is that you had spent some significant portion of your developmental years, basically childhood, in another country, in another culture than your own. For some reason, my parents decided, no, we'll send our kids to the British one. And he said, Dad, by the way, you have a bit of an accent. I was like, what? It's still telling that I think 93% of Americans never get a passport. If you learn English from Americans, you have different accents, different terminologies and stuff like that, depending on where the person comes from. And it's the same thing. So, people need to get off their high horse and be flexible with language, because that's how it is.
Gue pengen ngasih tahu nih, kalau lo pengen bikin podcast, gue saranin lo buat pakai Anchor. Anchor itu satu solusi untuk semua kebutuhan podcast. Mau rekam, hosting, hingga distribusi, semua bisa di Anchor. Dan yang paling penting nih, semuanya itu 100% gratis. Langsung aja buka anchor.fm/start. Sekali lagi di anchor.fm/start. Oke, lanjut. Hello, Daniel.
Hello.
Thank you for coming here, man.
Oh no, it's a pleasure to be invited.
I really want to have you here because I discovered your podcast a while back. The podcast is called Third Culture Talks, and it's I haven't met a TCK for a long time, so this will be an interesting conversation for myself.
Nice.
Because I don't know, I'm in that limbo between whether you wanna call me a TCK or not. Because
okay.
I did grew up abroad, but I didn't spend my entire childhood abroad, right? So I spent a portion of it here back in Indonesia as well. So so I don't know, because there's definition of a TCK is it's very I don't know if we should explain this to the listeners, because by now they're already wondering, like, what the hell is a TCK, right?
Well, the original term dates back like a little while, and it came from a few Americans who had worked on the concept because they had grown up internationally. And I like to use that as the general term because the important thing is that you had spent some significant portion of your developmental years, basically childhood, in another country, in another culture than your own. And that creates not like a third culture, which comes from the first culture being the culture of your like original country, wherever that may be, or culture. The second one being the host, wherever you happen to live. The third one being the created one that people share, where they have that, where they grow up internationally. They maybe come from different places, but they share something together. There's some things in common that they all understand, that they can relate to with each other. And that's the important thing. And it's not necessarily about the number of years that you spend, although, if you spent 3 months, probably doesn't count. But if you spend a longer time where it affects your identity and your development, then of course it does. And yeah. And regarding your insecurity, if you don't mind if I could keep on talking, it's an umbrella term, and there have been some attempts to sort of like broaden it out. So they've said also cross-cultural kids, CCKs as opposed to TCKs, to sort of like cover the umbrella. But for me, that's a lot of, I don't know, people trying to either do some gatekeeping, which I think is, I don't like it when people do that, or they're trying to over-define something that's quite fluid anyway. There's so much variety in the stories that why do you need to lock it down to just a certain strict definition? I'm okay with a broad understanding.
Exactly. Right. So, you know, that really got me thinking because, like you said, of course, it's not about the duration to a certain extent, right?
Mhm.
But having being born here in Indonesia and having spent almost 13 years in Indonesia first before moving abroad,
Mhm.
that allowed me to have a little bit of like a cultural identity here, right?
Mhm.
So it's not like I'm not in touch with my parents, culture and like
Yeah.
heritage. So I got the whole Indonesian culture package for the first 13 years, and then
Mhm.
moving abroad, and then got the whole international experience
Mm.
for I'd say 10 years ish, yeah, and
Okay.
then moving back to Indonesia again.
Mm.
So it doesn't really feel foreign to me, but
Okay.
at the same time, because I grew up abroad,
Mhm.
it's like it's like you experience the life as well, like the life of the TCK. I
Do you
don't know,
mind if
like
I ask where did you spend those 10 years?
oh yeah, all right. So my dad moved us all the way to Oman in the Middle
Mm.
East.
Mhm.
So I spent 6 years there,
Mhm.
around like middle school and high school,
Mhm.
and then another 4 years in the UK because
Mhm.
of university.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
Interesting. All right. Where in the UK did you study?
I went to London, so
Okay. Nice. Nice.
didn't
It's an
travel beyond, just
I,
just around it.
yeah. Well, I've always felt that London is a very cool city to study in and a pretty shitty city, if you don't mind the language, um, city to live and work in.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. Because I think the whole, like, I don't know if this is part of like the TCK life, or whatever,
Mm.
but uh beyond university, beyond like your uni life or your college life,
Mm.
then the from my personal experience, the TCK experience kind of started to die down because you started to realize there's like certain realities that you need to face.
Mm.
Like for example, like when you're a kid and you grew up abroad because of your parents' work, you get that privilege of
Mm-hmm.
having that international experience, going to an international school,
Mm-hmm.
and that could mean quite a decent life, right? But then, well, once you finish university and you need to enter the real world, per
Mm-hmm.
se, and then you realize there's things called bills, electricities, rent, and then you realize that,
Yeah.
my dad's not paying me anymore. So I need
Yeah.
to find a way to pay this. And then, yeah, London is one of the most expensive place. And then,
Mm-hmm.
sooner or later, I realized that, like, I cannot continue living there,
Mm-hmm.
at least to find a living. Although back then it was sort of like kind of the only goal that I had, right? To study and then work abroad, and then
Mm.
like I said, reality kicks in,
Yeah.
especially during final years in university when you realize that you need to find a job,
Mm-hmm.
and then that's when you realize that doesn't matter if you went to international school, you hang around all these Europeans and North Americans, but if you have an Indonesian passport in
Yeah.
Europe trying to find a job,
Mm-hmm.
well, good luck,
Yep.
because there's such thing called immigration
Mm-hmm.
and work permits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
so yeah, that's why I came back and start working here.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough. I can speak from experience that even as an American trying to find a job in Europe, not that easy. So, yeah.
Hey, how about yourself? Like, if someone asks you the Trinity question, like, where are you from? Like, uh, will it trigger you? And like, how do you let people know?
A lot of people have trouble with this, but like this is like the one thing I always, whenever I meet other people who know that they're TCKs, they go like, "Oh, I hate that question." For me, I like it actually, because but you know, you always have to remember who's asking you and why they're asking you. Are they just making conversation? Are they just meeting you and they're saying it's just like a way to like, you know, meet you and say, "Hi, my name is, this is where I'm from." It's just like, for some people, it's just that simple. And so they don't really care about details. But I like to sort of tease it out to find out whether they're actually interested or not. So,
Right.
when the first thing I say is like, it's kind of complicated or it's a long story. And if people are
Yeah.
interested, then I give them the short version. Like, I mean, if they say like, because I have met people who will stop there when I say it's complicated, they say like, "Oh, okay," and then they move on,
Mm.
and then that's fine. That they're not interested, and I'm not going to make them interested. But if people do take an interest, then I say like, yeah, you know, my parents are Vietnamese, but I was born in the U.S., but I grew up in Indonesia, but then I lived in Switzerland for most of my adult life. And then if people hear that, because that's pretty short, it's not too long.
Yeah.
But then if people are interested from there, then I can say like, yeah, you know, there's more, and then we have a conversation. It's a good icebreaker.
Hey, that's not too bad actually. But so, how did your parents ended up in Indonesia?
Well, the short answer is my dad got like, he was working for a company in the States and an oil company, and
Uh,
but he was like an IT guy, so like, during the 80s, he was getting sent on business trips to Indonesia a lot because it was an American company investing in Indonesia. And then in '89, that's when he got the official thing saying, "Hey, we might as well just move you there." He's like, "Guys, do you want to go? There's an expat package. It's pretty good." So yeah, so then we moved.
nice. We live
Yeah,
and die with that oil money.
yeah. I mean, he didn't stay with it though. One of the interesting stories that I remember was that he worked for the company in Indonesia for about 7 years, but then he didn't really gel with the other Americans working in the same company for the most part,
Mm, all
because
right.
most of them were like white American expat types. But you know, he's an Asian guy. He moved to the U.S. as a refugee when he was 19. You know, so it's a
Right.
little different. Yeah, because of the war in Vietnam. Short story. There's a long story there too, but I will not digress. But so he didn't quite gel with the other American expats he felt more in, because he's Asian, he felt more in common with Indonesian people. And you know, expats in Indonesia, there's usually kind of a big gap between them and the locals. And so, but he learned Bahasa Indonesia to a fluent level, basically, and he had more in common with
Uh,
them. And he got actually a good offer from a local cement company, and they were offering him a promotion to run their IT department. So then, yeah, so he jumped ship, and yeah, it was a good career move for him. And for
wow.
the rest of our time in Indonesia, he worked for them.
Right. Uh, so that at what age range then did you spend your time here
Uh,
in Indonesia?
from when I was 4 until I was 18 to move to college. So basically grew up here.
So international school,
Yeah,
obviously.
I went to the British
Uh,
International School.
right, the biz. All right.
Hmm.
I was gonna ask if you're a JIS guy or a biz guy.
I was a BIS guy. It was a weird choice because JIS is the American school, and for some reason my parents decided, no, we'll you know, send our kids to the British one, which just adds to the confusion.
All right. But even yeah, but from what I know, right, even though it's a British school, they do IBs, right? They
Hmm.
don't do A levels.
While I was there, they were doing both. So like they were transitioning from A levels to IB while I was like just before I started the IB. So there were still people doing the IB like maybe 1 or 2 years before I did it, but by the time I was there, everyone was on the IB program.
Right. Yeah. All right. Okay. And then after that, you went to Switzerland, you said?
No, I went to the States first.
All right. Okay. For university.
Yeah, like I had this vague idea that, like, you know what, I've never properly lived in the US. I should take the opportunity to go back and study there and find out what it's like to be American. And it became a big problem because going back was difficult without me realizing it. And I imagine it was similar for you.
What was difficult for you by moving back?
A lot of things, because we had been back to visit family quite often. Most of our extended family is based in Texas and Boston, and then we would go back on average once every year or two, but we would only hang out with family. I didn't have any normal American friends, and occasionally I met my cousin's friends, but like it wasn't something that stuck, And so my impression of American culture was still very detached, and outside of the occasional here and there, but like overall. And so when I went to university, my dad dropped me off at university in Michigan, and he said there were a number of things. One of the funny ones was that I didn't realize that 14 years in a British school had left an accent on me. And
right.
And he told me, hey, we were in the town, we were in the bed and breakfast in our hotel room, and he said, Dad, by the way, you have a bit of an accent. I was like, what? And then I proceeded to meet all these Americans who were all like, wow, you sound so British. And all my British friends from BIS, they would not have said that, but for Americans in the Midwest, yeah, they would. But
that's so funny.
Yeah, I had one. There was one guy. He was from Long Island, which is like New Yorkish, and he had this really strong Long Island accent. And he was the one saying, "Hang on, wait, say that again." And I was like, "What?" It's like, "Say girl again." And I was like, "Girl." It's like, "No, it's not girl. It's girl." I'm like, I had not realized that was how I was saying it. Yeah, but that's just like a superficial thing. The deeper stuff about moving there was a lot more like, and I had to. I'm not going to blame America for it, because it was me as well. Because as a teenager, I was not the long-term planning kind of person. People would ask me what I want to do with my life, and I really never had any answers. And so like going to university was kind of like I think the Asian thing, where you go like, well, obviously you go from high school, you go to university, and you'll figure it out when you get there. You just have to go to school. I can't waste time. Don't take a gap year. And once I was there, the American system's a lot more open than the British school that I had been going up in, where like there's a much stronger structure of what you should do. This is what you do. Whereas in the American university system, it's very like, well, you can take your first 2 years to do whatever you want, but then by the third year, you should know what you have to do. And it's like, oh, okay. So like you only have to declare your major in your third year out of 4. So it's a lot more free. And I had technically speaking, there were people to go to for guidance, but I didn't go to anybody, and I had no idea what to do. And I didn't really, even though I made friends there, I didn't really acclimatize, and there were a lot of things that I wasn't happy with, but I felt so far away from home, and and I realized like on a deep long-term level that there was no going back. Like I went to visit Jakarta one time, and that was the Christmas after I left, so it was like 6 months after I left, and I never went back again until just recently. So like in the past year, I've been working in Jakarta. But it was such a big blow because all my friends went to different places, so the chances of us meeting up was difficult. They all went to the UK or Australia or elsewhere, but like very few of them in the States. And if they were in the States, very far away from me. So I felt very alone and surrounded by Americans to whom many of them, this was the furthest they had been. They had never left the States, for example, in some cases, or they had all of it, like, moving to university was already a big deal, which it is. But for me, it was like also moving into a country which I was not familiar with. And I had to make all these American friends and not quite relate to them. And I've been talking for a long time. I'm sorry, you can stop me anytime.
No, dude. I just want to hear other people say that, because that's exactly the experience that I had when moving back to Indonesia, right? I mean, you have the passport, you have the family there, but then it's just different, like especially after spending like, I mean, I spent 10 years abroad, and then, but it's not like I'm detached with the culture, right? I still at least try to catch up with like the I don't know, like the music and the films, like and the language as well. So like it's not like I forgotten how to speak Indonesian, or even like informal Indonesian, like but it still felt very different, like I mean, despite all like the like if you want to call it like the superficial culture shocks, like if your case was like the accent, my case would be like the traffic, for example, right? So in the UK, London, you go by train and bus all the time, so you don't really experience this. In Oman, you basically have more roads than cars, so like that's not a problem, right? And then you went back, and then you realize that and then you're in the car, and then like you're not going anywhere. It was like
yep,
but yeah,
that was my childhood.
Yeah. So see, I didn't experience that, right? So and it was just a weird experience. I was like, oh man, you actually spent 2 hours in the car? Like, why?
Oh, only 2?
Yeah, like, and yeah, some people would say like, wow, 2? Like, yeah, I went from Bogor or like 3 hours. Like, wow.
Easily.
but yeah, but that feeling of like being different despite well, in my case, speaking the same language, looking the same because you're of the same race, and even being in like that majority religion group as well. So, but it still felt very different because you're brought up differently. Your point of view is different. You mentioned something, a good point just now about for those people in our respective country, going to college and meeting people from across the country is basically their world, right? They haven't experienced meeting people of different countries, different race, so the perspective is just different. So I don't know, like how long did it take you to get used to that feeling, to a point that well, this is it, this is how it is, then you just have to accept it, right? And then it's beyond your control.
Well, here's the thing. It kind of got beyond my control because I had such a difficult time in university. Not because it was difficult for me. I like to think that I'm a pretty smart guy, but I had no idea how to do it myself, and I didn't know how to ask for help, and I should have. But I also felt a lot of pressure from my parents, whether they intended it or not. Of course, they didn't intend to pressure me like to a problem, but like I felt it anyway. So whether it's internal or not is the thing. But I started to turtle up and kind of like hide from things, and that included not going to classes and stuff like that. So it inevitably led to actually dropping out of university in the States, which I was kind of lost about it because I wasn't performing well in class. One of my professors, she even like had a chat with me and said, "Hey, are you sure you're ready for university? Maybe." And I was like, "What would I do otherwise?" Because I didn't know. And she's like, "Maybe go out and get a job or something." And I was like, in so many ways that my 19-year-old self at the time could not explain. Like that would seem so outlandish to me because I had never lived in the States. I wouldn't know how to get a job and all these things, I wouldn't know how to support myself. I had never considered it before, and I wouldn't know where to go. Like, what would you do? Like all these things. And, but it got to a point where I just like kind of spiraled downwards and, dropping out of university. And my parents, they managed to basically track me down, pick me up. And by that time, the company my dad had worked for was bought out by a Swiss company, and then they moved him to Switzerland. So he picked me up, and they took me to Switzerland to stay with them because they were like, "Yeah, you're kind of in a bad way. We need to look after you." And I was like, maybe. And And then while I was there, it was like my mind kind of opened up, because moving to Switzerland and living in an environment where I didn't understand everything, but it felt more international. I was having to learn a different language again. I started learning German. I was meeting people from different countries through my German classes who were also like from everywhere. And somehow all of that felt so much more at home. And I was like, oh, okay, now I get it. You know? And then I ended up, my parents decided, okay, you can't just learn German. What do you want to do with your life? You should get a degree. And then they made the suggestion, like, we want to keep you close by, considering. So, and the only bachelor degree that they offer in Switzerland that's in English is hotel management, which is
okay.
which is what I ended up studying, which is a complete departure from what I intended to study, which is political science, but whatever. And I started in there's a lot of hotel schools in Switzerland, a lot of them. And in this case, and most of them are private schools. And so this small hotel school in Switzerland was super international. Like, the student body was not, in complete total, maybe 600-700 students altogether, spread across 2 campuses. And they had like 40 something nationalities. So it felt like going back to an international school, which felt like very comfortable. And even though hotel management was not something I had really ever pictured for myself, but I was kind of like, okay, I'll try it out. And then once I got there, I was like, okay, I like it here. I don't know if I like the degree even now, but like, whatever. Yeah, I'm having a good time. It's okay. And it was only when I graduated, then you have that, I think for everybody, regardless of whether you're a third culture kid or not, has that postgraduate realization, like you were saying, oh crap, I need to sort out what I want to do with my life, get a job, pay bills, all that stuff, you know? And especially with hotels, there's a specific kind of thing you can do, because there's recruitment and all that stuff. People want to work in hotels because it's a specific job. You don't have to worry about, like, what am I going to do with my degree? It's like, okay, I'll go be a hotel manager. And I went back to work in the States. I wanted a job in Europe, but they were like, oh, you don't have an EU passport, so but you can work at an American company. It's like, oh, fine. So I did. And then while I was there, I was a little bit hesitant about, like, okay, but I'm an older person now. I'm a little more mature. I've come to terms with what happened when I was in university in the States. I can go back and work there. And I did. And that was okay. I adapted it to it pretty okay. But then I decided, after 2 years of working, that I was like, I have, like, and I was surrounded by Americans again who, like, and these were people who were working in a pretty international resort hotel. And for them, like, they had a lot of other trainees who coming over from Europe. And for a lot of the Americans, it was like, oh, Europe, oof, what a dream, going so far away. And it's not that far, especially for Americans on American passports. It's not that far. It doesn't cost that much to go. But for a lot of Americans, they can't really conceive of that. They'll do it like once in their lives. I don't know, something like that. They don't have to, but like it's still telling that I think 93% of Americans never get a passport, because the 7% they travel a lot, but then the rest they travel within the States because they don't feel the need to go outside. So while I was living there, I was realizing I have such a privilege that that we have this passport that lets you travel so easily. My parents still live in Switzerland. I kind of liked it there anyway. I might as well try and go back. So so that was 2011 that I just made that decision, and I have not gone back to the States since. So hey,
wow, all right, that's amazing. And it's good to know that you also from that lowest point in your life back in university, now you bounced back, you found your you went to Switzerland, and you said you learned German in Switzerland, right? So you learned Schweizerdeutsch, right, which is the more complicated version of German on top of like normal German.
And this is one of those interesting things with languages. Like, Technically speaking, I learned a lot of languages while growing up. My sister always got the credit though, because everyone was saying, "Wow, she's so good at languages. You're okay, Dan." Like, but but even by any standard, when you think about it, we were growing up with Vietnamese at home, English at school, and in my school, they were teaching us French and Bahasa Indonesia from a very young age. So I got both to an okay level. And then in my IB, some friends and I we decided it would be a very clever idea to do beginner Spanish because that sounded easier than more advanced French. And then I did Spanish as well when I went to university in the U.S. And then I was 20 by the time I moved to Switzerland and I started learning German. And that was when I was realizing, because German kind of came quickly to me, which was a surprise. Everyone says it's a really difficult language. And and it was coming quickly to me. And I noticed as well over the years, many people learning German while they were there complained that, like, oh, in the classroom we learn Hochdeutsch, High German, or the standard German. But you go outside and people speak Swiss German. And for me, that was part of it. But it was the most important thing was that, like, well, that's just how languages work. Nobody talks like they do in a classroom, like.
Exactly.
Same with Indonesian. Like every Indonesian that I met outside of Indonesia, I'm like, oh, hey, I speak Bahasa as well. And and then they say, oh, you sound so funny. You sound like you're in a classroom, because nobody speaks like that in the street. So,
there you go. Yep.
It's the same with Swiss German, I think, in my opinion, like, so yeah, High German is a thing. If you go to Germany, a lot of people speak it, especially in the cities. But if you go to Switzerland, everybody speaks dialect, and then that's just how people are. If you learn English from Americans, you have different accents, different terminologies, and stuff like that, depending on where the person comes from. And it's the same thing. So, people need to get off their high horse and be flexible with language, because that's how it is.
Dude, 100% agreed. And because I don't know, if we talk about languages, it'll be another like half an hour of like topic, because I have so many like thoughts and opinions about this, and not just about language, but also about accents, right? Because despite attending like a British school for like 6 years plus, British university as well, I never pick up the accent as well, right? But if I came home to Indonesia and speak English, they would say that I have a British accent, which is weird because there's no way near. And then, but so again, I'm in that limbo. If like, is this like a British accent or is it like an American accent? Like, I don't know. Like, is it an Indonesian English accent? Like, I don't know. Like, because like, it's kind of like blend in and like everything, right?
Yeah.
But
exactly.
speaking of like, language, right? I want to know like how from all that journey, that how did you ended up back in Indonesia? Because I kind of know where you work in Indonesia from your Instagram post, but just let me know the story how you got back here.
So this is another story. So here's the thing. So I when I left the States, I was doing it to be like, I'm gonna embrace my international TCK whatever identity and go out into the world because I can. And part of that was also like, I wasn't too happy with the hotel manager career track. I had been working as a night manager at my hotel, which is an interesting job. You get all the cool stories, but then no one wants to do your job. So your chances of promotion are kind of difficult because no one's going to replace you. So like I had reached like, I don't know, 2 years in, and I was chatting with my boss, and he's like, yeah, give yourself another like 2-3 years and then we'll talk about promotions. And I'm like, what? I'm in my mid-20s and you want me to waste 2 or 3 more years working nights? Excuse me, no. But in general, I looked at my bosses and I thought, oh, do I want to be you in 10 years or 20 years? Like, nah, not really. And so I also decided I wanted a career change. and I was still super interested in politics and international relations and history and stuff. And I was like, why not go back and study it? So the plan was to go back and try and apply for a master's somewhere, because I was like, okay, build on my bachelor degree, but yeah, it's in hotel management, but hopefully I can save myself some time. And it turns out I can't. So a hotel management bachelor's is too different. And, I had to waste a year. I mean, waste is a word, but like I tried applying for master's programs. They didn't take me. And then I ended up backpacking in mostly Southeast Asia, but like it's another fun third culture kid story, because like I met up with a lot of friends, because at first I was in Thailand and a friend of mine in Phuket said, hey, come visit me. And I said, okay. And then after a couple of weeks, a friend of mine in Penang in Malaysia said, hey, I got a spare room, come visit me. I said, okay. After a month, another friend of mine, he was from Hong Kong but studying in Australia, but he said, hey, I'm going to go back to Hong Kong and visit my family for like a holiday. Come stay with me. I said, okay. And so I did that for a while, but ended up mostly in Malaysia. And then that's when I got word that I got basically to come back to Switzerland, because I was going to go study at the University of Zurich. And I had to start a new bachelor's, but I thought, well, I'm 26 at this point. I have time. It's okay. And, but then I ended up like, I think I'm just not a very good student. I think I'm a smart person, but I'm not a very good student, because I didn't end up passing the classes that I needed to. I'm going to blame partially the Swiss system. It's not very flexible. But also like maybe it was me. Maybe I had been outside for too long and I was used to working and I was used to being able to like talk to people and figure something out, or just to be like, oh yeah, you make a good impression on someone and then that gets you far, because that's what had worked for me so far. But in Swiss university, it's sort of like in a public Swiss university, it's sort of like, nope, you didn't make it, too bad, and you can never do this again. So but I was enjoying my life in Zurich. I think I'm a live in the moment kind of person. And I kind of wanted to stick around because I liked it. I didn't want to feel like a failure, so I wanted to keep studying. And then I ended up sticking around there for a little too long, in the logical sense. Like, logically speaking, I probably should have left earlier. But I just enjoyed my life there. I liked my friends. I started working as a tour guide there. If you ever need to know anything about Zurich, I know it to a microscopic detail, and I have a lot of contacts. So I started doing stand-up comedy while I was there, and all these things. Like, I was living my best life. I just wasn't getting anywhere in the way that you can tell your parents that you're getting anywhere. And eventually the Swiss authorities were kind of like, hey, you don't seem to be getting anywhere on this student visa. I was like, oh, right, you noticed. And I'm told that like in Germany, it's not uncommon. Like a lot of people just like stick around on a student visa forever. But like in Switzerland, they're like, nah, there's a time limit, and you're getting past it. So so I had to leave, but I wasn't sure what to do. I always generally liked the idea of teaching. And a comedian friend of mine, shout out to Ben Delahaye, if he ever listens to this, I have no idea. My friend Ben in Switzerland worked for EF in Switzerland. And he said, hey, I don't know where you're going to go, but maybe it's worth it to apply for something in my company. They have schools in Indonesia if you ever wanted to go. And I thought, okay, why not? Kind of always generally wanted to go back. It's been a long time since I was there. And I moved back. But then I moved, and I first went back to Malaysia because I really liked Malaysia when I was there. I had lived there for at that point 6-7 months, and I was quite acclimatized. So going back seemed like a nice idea. I ended up volunteering at youth hostels there, which was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I felt like it was exercising all my skills, because tour guiding, you get good with people, and just meeting people and giving a good impression, and discovering locations and stuff like that, and showing people. And so living in a hostel and being a volunteer to be like, hey, welcome to the hostel. here's your areas around, wherever, and here's what you should do. Oh, let's go hang out, all that stuff. And oh, you come from Spain? I speak Spanish. Blah 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 blah. Oh, you're a Swiss? I speak Swiss German. Blah 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 blah. And I was exercising all my languages and stuff like that. It was a lot of fun. But then I heard from EF in Indonesia to say, hey, we got a position for you. You want to come? I said, yes. I need a job. I need I need a job at this point. And so I came back early last year, and it was nice actually, like seeing things. Also, like after some months listening to Bahasa Melayu, Malay, it was so refreshing to hear Indonesian, because I feel like Indonesian enunciates itself better. They sound it's easier to understand, because like in Malaysia they speak a lot more. And
yeah, I get what you mean.
even if you understand the words, it's difficult to understand the meaning, and whereas with Indonesian it's so clear. I'm like, oh right, yeah, okay, I get it, and then familiar dishes, sight smells, Jakarta smells, traffic, all that stuff was like, oh yeah, wow, I'm back. So,
you're back. Nice.
Differently.
Yeah, different area, obviously. Can I ask like which English first location are you teaching at?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not teaching there anymore. But I spent a year working for the EF in Rawamangun, just in East Jakarta.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Why did I ask about the location of the EF that you're working on? Because my nephew actually studied English in EF. Because it was just so funny if you were actually like his teacher. So there you go. I hope you enjoy the first part of two of my conversation with Daniel. Thanks again for Daniel for coming over to the podcast. Good to meet a fellow TCK. Okay, for those of you guys that may still wonder like, what the hell is a TCK, the short answer is that TCK stands for Third Culture Kids, right? So, a first culture kid, or anyone who is first culture, would have the same upbringing and culture and whatnot as their parents, right? So imagine if you're Indonesian, you were born and raised in Indonesia, your parents are Indonesians. There you go. That's your culture. A second culture would be that you have a different upbringing than your parents. You were raised in a different environment. So let's say that your parents are Indonesian, but they emigrated to the US or Canada. You were born there. You were raised as a Canadian, as American. That's your culture. But a third culture kid doesn't relate with the parents' culture or even the place where they were raised, right? So example would be, your parents are Indonesians, then you move to the Middle East, but you didn't really become part of their culture. You didn't become like a nationality from that country. You don't speak Arabic. So you have your third culture, you're something different, and usually it happens with international students who people who go to international school because of their parents' work, and it happened to both Daniel and I. So I hope you enjoy that. Second part should be out sometime next week. We'll talk slightly. We'll be talking a different topic than this, since Daniel is not only a TCK but also a comedian. So I will talk to him. We'll be talking about stand-up comedy a bit more. So be sure to follow Spotify or subscribe to my YouTube channel, whichever you're listening it from. Send me an email
at podcastbosandijalan@gmail.com. Once again, podcastbosandijalan@gmail.com, or hit me up on social, Twitter at Ramdisa, and Instagram at podcastbosandijalan. Alright, so that's about it from me. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you udah dengerin podcast Bosan di Jalan bareng gue Ram. Gua mau ngucapin terima kasih sama Craving For yang udah support gue di podcast ini. Craving For is the taste you'll never forget, the sin you'll never regret. Mereka ini punya koleksi dessert box beragam yang pastinya bakal bikin kamu ketagihan. Ada coklat mousse cake, tiramisu, dan personal favorite gua nih, cinnamon rolls. Jadi, buruan aja cek Instagram mereka di @craving4.id, sekali lagi di @craving4.id. DM mereka untuk pemesanan. Craving For, the taste you'll never forget, the sin you'll never regret.